Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. And welcome to the final day of Ryerson's Fall Virtual Open House. My name is Jessica, and I'm pleased to be your host for today's Get to Know Urban and Regional Planning. Ryerson has shifted to an essential services model to help prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, which is why we are on your screens and not with you in person. We've put together a series of virtual sessions in order to share information and connect with you from the comfort of your own home or wherever you may be tuning in from today. Ryerson is working diligently to provide students with fulsome experiences while maintaining the health and safety of our community. There have been many sessions that have taken place across these last 2 weeks of our fall virtual open house. So we encourage you to check out our website in the coming weeks to watch some of the recordings from these sessions, as well as look at some of the other things that are happening around our university as well. Now, before we begin with our presentation, I would like to go through a few Zoom housekeeping tips. We encourage you to ask questions. We have many faculty and staff members that are here working really hard behind the scenes to make sure that you are getting all of your questions answered. We'll also be leaving some time near the end of the presentation for a live Q&A. So pay attention to that as well, and feel free to throw some questions in the Q&A box anytime. To do this, simply move your mouse over the bottom of your screen where you'll see an option of Q&A. Click on this, and this will pull up a dialog window. This is where you can type your questions as well as see some of the questions that other students and people who are joining us have asked as well. So then that way that'll give you an idea of what other people are asking too. If you happen to have any audio or video issues, please also feel free to flag that in the Q&A pod, and one of our staff members will be able to hopefully troubleshoot with you and assist to make sure that you are getting the best experience as possible. You can also rearrange your screen any way that works for you. Whatever you do to your screen will not affect ours. It'll only adjust yours. So feel free to make things bigger or smaller or move it around however you please. As you will notice, this presentation is also being closed captioned to ensure accessibility. If you require closed captioning, please select that option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Also note that this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our website at a later date for you to review this. Keep in mind that this does not include the Q&A box. So if you happen to get a really great answer from us during the presentation that you want to save for later, feel free to take a screenshot, a photo, or maybe make a note of it on your computer to go back to at a later time. Now, even though we are not physically on Ryerson's campus, we still feel that it's important to recognize the land in which our university exists. So to begin today's presentation, I will start with a land acknowledgement. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans and all newcomers, have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. Now, as much as this session is for you to get to know all things about our urban and regional planning, we also would like to get to know a little bit about those of you that are joining us today. So I've just launched a poll that should be on your screen, and I'd encourage you to vote in if you're a prospective student, whether you're a parent guardian, teacher counselor, or a transfer student. So I'm going to leave this up on the screen for a few more seconds for you to vote in here. And while I do this, I would like to introduce our presenter. So I'm going to be turning things over to Professor Pamela Robinson to take things away from the School of Urban and Regional Planning. Feel free to go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Pamela Robinson. Thank you, Jessica, for hosting this session for us today. I'm a professor and I'm the director of the School of Urban Regional Planning today. If you go to the next slide, I can also introduce you to the people who have joined us today. So we're super lucky. I know that you've probably got some questions about the program, but you're probably equally, or if not more, interested in learning more about what student life is like in our program. So I'm really pleased to be joined by Amana Rahel and Nicholas Klimchu, who are our co-presidents of RAPS, that's the Ryerson Association of Planning Students. So throughout the session that I'm going to give, I'm going to turn to Amana and Nicholas a few times to ask them to weigh in on their student point of view, and they're certainly going to be able to answer questions as well. We're really hoping that this will be the beginning of an ongoing conversation between you and us about why coming to Ryerson Planning School could be a great option for you. Next slide, please. So what is urban planning? Some of you may know what urban planning is already, and that's why you're here. Some of you may be thinking that you'd like to consider urban planning. So we thought we'd start with a basic introduction. In Canada, we have a Canadian Institute of Planners. So that's the organization that gathers Canadian urban planners, and they define urban planning in the following way. Planning meets the scientific, aesthetic, and orderly disposition of land, resources, facilities, and services with a view to securing the physical, economic, social efficiency, health, and well-being of our urban and rural communities. It's a very accurate definition, but it's probably one of the dullest ways of describing the work that we do as planners. So I hope that between myself and Nicholas and Amana, we can start to bring that to life. Next slide, please. So as you know, you probably live somewhere, you probably have an opinion about the place that you live, and you have thoughts about how to make it better. One of the things that urban planners do is we help shape the growth of communities, both through long-range work, so designing policies that figure out how communities will look and evolve over the next 30 years. But we also work on the ground in real time to make changes in communities in real ways. And one of the ways we do that is by shaping the design and the form of the communities in which we live. And so planners help make decisions around where buildings should go and where new transit lines should be, and which parks and open spaces need to be nurtured and protected. Our planning students go on to graduate to do a whole range of career options, which we'll talk about towards the end of this slideshow. Next slide, please. So there are some really interesting things about planning that I'd like to focus on today. First of all, planning is both art and science. And so if you're a student who's interested, say, in anthropology and in law and in psychology and in geography, but also in design and in math or computer science, urban planning could be the right kind of program for you, because in our program, we mix arts and science-like topics. We mix technology with going out and experiencing places firsthand in terms of getting outside the classroom and going and being in the field or in your community. The most important thing I think for you to know about planners is that we try to affect change in real places with real people on the ground. So this isn't an abstract practice. The work that we do is intended to be real, and it's intended to make a difference. We also work across scales. So urban planner can do work that makes a difference on the sidewalk in front of your house. It can make a difference in your neighborhood. It can make a difference in the city in which you live. It can make a difference in your region, or even in the country or globally. Global climate change and the climate emergency is one interesting example. You may not know that 80% of the power that we have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions lies within the power of municipal government, and in some parts within the work that planners can do, because we shape how people move around their cities and where they live, both of which contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So that's just one example. We also tackle a range of issues. So if you care about affordable housing, if you care about anti-Black racism, if you care about sustainability or the global climate emergency, or about making sure that people have access to fresh, affordable, healthy food, if you care about design and you care about how parks and open spaces can meet the needs of residents, these kinds of things are the things that urban planners do. So while we work in real places with real people to try to make a difference, the one thing that binds us is that we focus on the local for the most part in the work that we do. But some of us do long range work, and some of us do work that matters today and tomorrow as well. The other thing that's important for you to understand is that being an urban planner is different, for example, than being a geographer. We are what's called a registered profession. That means that when you finish planning school, if you go through the steps, you can call yourself an urban planner. Not anyone is supposed to be able to call themselves an urban planner. You need to be registered as a professional, which means that our planning education at Ryerson, which is a registered professional planning program, trained you to be eligible to be a practicing planner with the title of urban planner. And I'll go into that a little bit more soon. Next slide, please. So if you look at this photograph, it's the photograph of our campus. And that arrow looks like it's not pointing at anything, but it's actually pointing to the building that we call home, which is 105 Bond Street. Ryerson's campus is located in the heart of downtown Toronto, although we're all coming to you from the comfort of our own homes right now. Yonge and Dundas is the closest intersection to our campus. And you might know the Eaton Center. That's relatively close and part of our neighborhood. One of the interesting things about Ryerson's campus, if you've ever come to visit or when you could come back when it's safe after the pandemic is over, is that you'll notice that it's a little bit hard sometimes to tell where our campus begins and where our campus ends. And that's on purpose. We are a downtown campus that is part of a vibrant community. We want you to be part of the city of Toronto, part of our neighborhood, and part of our campus all at the same time. And so it's a different kind of campus, but it's a kind of campus that works for a program like ours because we're city builders. Next slide, please. So our program at Ryerson has 3 full-time degrees at the undergraduate level. We also have master's level planning, but you're all here to speak about the undergraduate program. And based on what I saw in the poll, it seems like a significant majority of you are here to focus on our 4-year planning degree, which is the degree that students do when they come out of high school. And it's a 4-year bachelor's program that will lead you, as I said before, to being eligible for professional accreditation as an urban planner. Next slide, please. One of the questions that we get asked a lot are, what kind of classes will planners take? We're going to send a link in the chat. Carly, who is one of our staff from our school, will put up a link that will allow you to gain more information. But here's an overview of what our curriculum looks like. In first year planning, you'll take 10 courses over 2 terms, so 5 courses per semester. And the kinds of classes you take will include the following. One is an introduction to the planning process. What is planning? How does it work? How do planners work with the public? You'll also take a class that looks at the evolution of cities in terms of the history of planning. You'll take economics and politics and sociology outside of our program in those departments. You'll take an ecology course for planning. You'll take a course on planning practice. And most importantly, in the winter term of first year, you start one of 6 planning studios. And I'll talk a little bit about studios in just a minute. Studios are at the heart of how we teach planning at Ryerson and where your career-ready planning education starts to take shape. In second year, you do 2 more course studios. You take statistics, planning theory, and then you get to start taking electives. In third year, you'll take more studio. We have a lot of studio. You'll take law, more electives, which at third year can include placement and internship. And I can talk a little bit about those in a minute, along with a field trip and a policy course in research design. Field trips are part of the ways in which we get out and about in our communities and around the world when it's safe to travel. Then in fourth year planning program, you take your final studio, more electives, another field trip, ethics, finance, more policy, and a focus on implementation. So if you look at the sum of these classes together, what you'll start to see is the wide range of ways in which you learn about cities and the patterns that shape and form them. It includes the flow of money. It includes design. It includes being able to analyze data to inform decision making. You learn about politics and policy. You learn about human behavior. You learn all kinds of interesting things that together start to form a planning education. You also have the opportunity in our program to take a handful of minors, and Carly will put information about the minors in the chat box so you can see. So some of our students, for example, do an urban planning degree with a minor in politics and public administration. But the focus as a planning student is on core planning classes. So there's no major in our program. You are a planning student, and we will keep you very, very busy. Next slide, please. One of the things I want to help you understand is, what is a planning studio? If you look at the slide on the right, the empty classroom, we wanted to show you what our classrooms look like right now. We're very sad that there are no students in them. We're doing all of our learning for Planning Studio virtually online. But in planning studios, we roll up our sleeves, we tackle real problems that matter to real people, and we always ground our learning in real places. And so when you think about studio, you might think about what architects do, which is they do a lot of drawing, both by hand and on computers. We do some of that, but we also do other work in studio too. We tend to work together in groups. Group work is a big part of the planning curriculum because most of the problems that planners are trying to tackle are bigger than the work that one person can do on their own. So being able to work together in teams is key to how we work because we're tackling complicated and important issues. Planning studio is really practical. It's how you start to build your professional skill sets. So Waterloo University has a co-op program in its planning program. We have 6 core studios as part of our career ready learning. So from the first year of planning school right through the end, you start to begin to gain practice about planning studios and planning practice by doing the work in our studio related courses. Next slide, please. We also really emphasize career-ready learning by learning in the field. In third and fourth year, what we do is we send you out on a field trip for a week. This year, our studios were virtual. Our field trips were virtual because of the travel bans related to the pandemic. But every year, we have students traveling to Canadian and North American cities, along with some students opting to do international field trip related work. So if you look at the picture on the slide in front of you, you see a picture of people sitting up very straight, looking happy, where it says, "I love Guangzhou." That was part of one of our international field camps 2 summers ago, where a team of students went with Professor Zhu Wang to China, and they did a field camp with planning students from Canada and planning students from China together. The other picture on this slide shows our students last fall in Boston. We often send students to Boston or New York or Baltimore or Chicago. And in these cities, along with Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and Montreal, we tend to do planning related field work by intensively studying how a city works and meeting with professional planners and community members over a week-long planning period. This is core to our program and a big part of how we make sure that your planning education is real and relevant to practice. Next slide, please. So next I'm going to turn to Nick and Amana in a second, and I want you to answer the question, what's it like being a planning student in a virtual environment? We've got students here who are high school students. To everybody who's in a quadmester system, congratulations on finishing your first quadmester. It probably feels like a big accomplishment, but I'd love to hear from Nick and Amana. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what it's like to learn in a virtual environment right now, because you started your planning education in the studio and now you're learning online. So Amana, do you want to start, and then maybe we'll bump over to Nicholas?
Yeah, for sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Pamela, as well, for giving this presentation. So being a planning student learning virtually is for sure different. Not necessarily bad, not necessarily good, but it's different. You learn many fundamental skills through the virtual platform that I feel you couldn't necessarily learn in an environment that isn't virtual. So I've learned how to be very organized and on top of things, which I learned just this year, being in my third year. I've also gained a lot of time that I would have been spending commuting to be doing things virtually. Honestly, if you're on top of everything and you're committed, it'll be a positive experience for sure.
Nicholas, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Yeah, thanks again for coming on out today. So yeah, just to kind of echo what Amanda was saying, for sure, it's definitely a different experience, and it's a definitely different way of learning how to manage your time. So there's a lot of sort of hidden gifts that kind of come with that kind of change. So yeah, and what I found personally is that there's still an opportunity to create community virtually as well, which is a really great thing. We're blessed with the technology that we have today to easily connect and meet. I found instructors have been very accommodating to the circumstances, and it's just been a great experience overall.
Thanks, you too. I can certainly say from our perspective as planning faculty members, one of the things, in our heart of hearts, we would rather be back in the classroom with all of our students, but we're all trying to use this opportunity while we're learning planning from home and teaching from home to try to get to better understand how can the work of planners continue even when we can't gather in communities face to face, because planning hasn't stopped because there's a pandemic. Planners are needed now more than ever. And so it's been a vital part of, we're all getting a lot better at doing online conversations and trying to find meaningful ways to connect. And that's a good professional skill set, although we're looking forward to being back in person. Okay, next slide, please. So we've done a number of things that I wanted to share with you that focus on our building. Our home location, the address is 105 Bond, and sometimes we refer to what happens in our building as 105 bonding. Right now, we're investing in a significant number of classroom upgrades, and so our hope is that if you come and join us this fall, you'll be able to be the first students who've learned in our new upgraded planning studios. But 105 Bond is really the heart of what our school is. And when you have the chance to come and see our campus, you'll see that our facilities look pretty ordinary, but when they're full of students, they're incredible places. Ryerson planning students tend to live all across the Greater Toronto Hamilton area. So it's not uncommon to be a student who's commuting. We have students taking all kinds of public transit to come to school. Some people are walking and some students are cycling. But what that means is that when people come to campus, our school really matters and the space that we have really matters. And so 105 Bond is really our home at the planning school, and it's the anchor of who we are as a community of planners. Next slide, please. So one of the questions we get asked all the time is, will I get a job? And this comes from students, and it also comes from parents. And some of you may be having help from parents. And so not only do you want to have an education that's fun and interesting, but you also want to know if you're going to get a job. So the Canadian Institute of Planners issues a report every year called the National Compensation and Benefits Survey. It's very long. It's full of statistics and numbers. If your parents want to know if you're going to get a job, you can direct them to that. And Carly will put the link in the chat. You're also welcome to go and have a look. But I'm going to provide a few highlights about the kinds of work that planners do. Next slide, please. So when you look at the breakdown of where planners work, 35% of people who graduate with a planning degree go and work for municipal or local governments. So the city of Mississauga, the city of Brampton, the city of Toronto, or regional municipalities like the region of Halton or the region of Durham. 33, almost 34% of our graduates work in the private sector. That means that they work for either consulting firms or they work for developers who develop land and then sell it. 3% of planning graduates, roughly, like people like me, end up teaching and working in education. And just over 10% of graduates from urban planning programs in Ontario end up going to work in community-based organizations or civil society organizations. So people who work in what we call the not-for-profit sector. Next slide, please. So that's how it breaks down. This morning, I went to Workopolis and Googled urban planning jobs, and I just wanted to show this slide to give you a range of the kinds of jobs that planners are getting today and the kind of jobs that are available. So there are urban design jobs, there are community planning jobs, there are jobs at private sector firms, and there are people who do planning and communication work. So if you're interested in the kind of work that planners do, if you go to any job search site and type in urban planner, you'll start to see the work that comes up. Our students tend to be very marketable when they finish our program, and they tend to have quite good success getting jobs. They have good success getting jobs because they're well trained as professional planners, but also because we have a large alumni network that's very loyal to our students and helps mentor students along the way, but also helps students find work on the other side. Ryerson also has a career center that's very focused on meeting the needs of students to have both the skills they need to find employment and then also to help them find access to excellent paid work on the other side of their education. So we take this notion of making sure that you're career ready with your work very seriously at the School of Urban and Regional Planning at Ryerson. Next slide, please. So why should you consider picking Ryerson Urban Planning? Next slide, please. The first reason we hope that you'll think about choosing us is that we're a city building institution. Because of the location in which we find our campus, but also because of the mindset of Ryerson, we focus on city building. Next slide, please. You'll start to get a sense if you start to look at these articles, which you can click on through the City Building Ryerson website, the kinds of things that Ryerson cares about as an institution. We care about pandemic preparedness. Ryerson faculty members, including urban faculty, professors, and students, are working on COVID-related issues right now. We also care about reconciling our past with Indigenous peoples. We have a large process where we're trying to work on truth and reconciliation at Ryerson. In our faculty, we have an advisor to our dean on Indigenous resurgence. And starting in January, Ryerson Planning School will have its first Indigenous faculty member. We also care about combating systemic racism. We have a working group of faculty members, students, and alumni who are focusing on how the Ryerson School of Urban and Regional Planning can take a more strategic and impactful approach to addressing anti-Black racism, anti-Asian racism, anti-Indigenous racism, and other forms of systemic bias. And this is work that we're taking seriously. And we also focus on making sure that Ryerson's work, including the work inside our school, is focused on community building. Next slide, please. We have been a planning school for 51 years now, so we bring to your planning education a long history of teaching undergraduate planners how to become successful professional practicing urban planners, and it also means that we have a large alumni network from which we can draw. Our alumni are amazingly generous. They support a number of scholarships that support our students. They also host mentoring sessions and things like participating in Ryerson Career Week, which is being offered by the Ryerson Association of Planning Students right now, focused on helping students start to think about the kinds of work they're going to do. Next slide, please. We also have strong partnerships with the profession. Between our undergraduate and our graduate programs, in any given year, we've got over 24 studio projects live and running. In the last year, we worked with over 60 community partners across the region. We also have faculty members who are both registered professional planners and professors doing research. So I'm a good example of that. If you look at my name, if you Google me online, you'll see Dr. Pamela Robinson, so I have a PhD, MCIP RPP, which means I'm a member of the Canadian Institute of Planners, and I'm also a registered professional planner in the province of Ontario. Before I became a professor, I worked in local government as a municipal planner. I've also maintained a planning practice on top of being a professor for the last 25 years. So I'm not alone in that regard. Ryerson planning professors are engaged in the community. We're doing research that impacts community, and our research also creates opportunities for students. On this slide, you can see some of the labs that we have in our school, many of which employ students. So we have the Center for Urban Research and Land Development, the Transform Lab, the Together Lab, which focuses on housing and working with Indigenous communities of people, the Ecological Design Lab, and the Reactivate Lab. All of these labs, among the other work that Ryerson planning faculty members are doing, are intended to both make a difference in communities, but also create opportunities for students to get involved. So it's an excellent partnership. Next slide, please. So why else should you consider coming to Ryerson Planning School? One of the really important things we'd like you to think about is that studio is at the heart of how we work and what we do in our planning school, but it also means that you have a chance to meet other students. Ryerson's a big university in a big city, but our planning school feels quite small and quite intimate. When you're a planning student, all of those courses that I listed earlier on are courses you're going to take with students in the same year as you. So we take roughly about 125 students into our program into first year. You will have 6 classes with them over your first 2 semesters, and you'll continue to see those students all the time, including in our building, over your 4 years with us in your planning education. So one of the advantages is that gives us is that we're a smaller program inside a big institution. So you get all of the benefits of a community that's focused on planning, but then you get all the perks of being part of a larger university. Next slide, please. I'm going to turn to Amanda and Nick now. Maybe you can tell us, or tell the group of folks who've joined us, what it was about our planning school that made you choose us.
Yeah, so firsthand experience being in the school as a student. So I had a bunch of options to choose from before applying. I wasn't completely certain of what I wanted to do, but if I knew then what I knew now, it would have been an easy choice. So I picked Ryerson's urban regional planning because of how practical it was and how once you're done the 4 years, you're an urban planner, which isn't really offered in many programs. It's a very specific thing that you get after you graduate, yet it's so broad and you could choose from so many things. So ultimately what put me over the top for Ryerson urban planning was the field trip that we do offer. So it's more of like a practical portion, and I found that so interesting, which you get to do in both 3rd year and 4th year. I also picked Ryerson's urban planning because it just makes sense to study urban planning in Toronto, in the heart of Toronto. I think it's an insane experience that I'm so happy to be a part of. So yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I was fortunate enough to kind of like have an idea of what I wanted to do from early on, and it was just a matter of going ahead and pursuing it and applying to a program because I knew it was like the place I wanted to be for a while. But yeah, because it kind of came from an interest I had in architecture growing up and design of buildings and stuff like that. But then it became more on like a wider scale of like it's like I was focusing on buildings and everything and all that cool stuff, but also like how the streets are laid out, how traffic flow works, stuff like that. And I was like, well, I'm looking at things on a much larger scale. There must be like a field that could encompass all that. So I came across urban planning probably around early in high school, and I was able to realize that this would be the field I would be definitely interested in pursuing. And in terms of picking Ryerson specific for urban planning, I think it was similar reason to what Amana noted, is that it is in the heart of downtown Toronto. So it's like it makes sense to really plan in the city where all like the issues are happening, and you see kind of everything unfolding live right in front of you while you're studying it, which I think is really, really, it's extremely valuable. And just the level of practicality that the program brings is definitely something that can never be overlooked. And personally, now I'm in 3rd year. In retrospect, I can't really see myself in any other program. So I think that's a good thing.
Thanks, Nicholas. For sure, one of the things our students tell us over and over and over again is that your trip from home to school every day is a reminder of just why urban planners need to continue to get better to do the work you do, right? Whether you're taking the GO train or you're walking or you're riding a bike or you're driving a car, your experience coming to campus every day really reminds you of how important our work is, but how we really got to up our game because we have to make our cities more livable and sustainable. Thanks. Next slide, please. Okay, so right now it's November. September feels like a really long way off. I want to just give everyone who's watching, if you're like sure you really want to be a planner and you really can't bear the idea of having to wait. I mean, next spring may seem like a long way off. I just want to remind you that there's some ways you can start to keep in touch with us. One of them is to follow us on Instagram on the Ryerson SERP Instagram page. Even more importantly, I think, is for you to also consider following RAPS, the Ryerson Association of Planning Students, on Instagram as well. It's important for you to do that because you'll start to get a sense of the kinds of things that our students are doing. And then I'm going to put a third thing on your radar, which is to think about getting involved with an organization called Urban Minds. And Urban Minds is a Toronto-based organization that helps high school students engage in city building activities. And some of you may have a one-up club at your high school. If you do, that's an opportunity to get involved. But we partner with Urban Minds on a number of things, including something that we tried last year when the pandemic hit, which was called weekly warm-ups. We ran weekly warm-ups in June, once a week on Thursdays at lunch, for all of the students who'd accepted our program, because we knew that school was not going perhaps the way you were hoping it was going. And we really wanted you to feel a part of who we were as a community of planners from the beginning. Nicholas and Amano were part of that and great help. And the weekly warm-ups were a great way to start to get you to meet the people that you're going to be starting planning school with in September, but not having to wait until the summer was over. Next slide, please. So I'm going to wrap up my part of the presentation by just saying that we really hope that you'll choose to come plan with us. We've got an opportunity to answer questions in the next kind of 25 to 30 minutes. And we really hope that you'll opt to apply to a program that really centers planning studio and planning practice and making a difference in the communities in which we all live as part of the reason why you want to come and join us at Ryerson Planning School. Thank you. Oh, and one last thing we can tell you. In case you can't find it, we have a really fun code on the OUAC website. It's SUP, pretty easy to remember. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation, and for our students who had some great conversations there about why you chose Ryerson and your experiences. It's been very helpful. So what's going to happen now, as Professor Pamela Robinson was saying, we are going to open things up for some questions. So I know that we've populated some of the Q&A box already, but if you haven't had any of your questions answered or you have some follow-ups to some of the things we've already discussed, feel free to start putting them in the Q&A box, and I will start to moderate them. So first question that we had come through was, within the planning program, are there any specializations that students can choose?
So there are two specializations that aren't like hardcore official, but things that you can start to do. One focuses on transportation planning, the other one focuses around environmental planning. What we're really trying to do in our program and the way in which it's focused is train you to be a planner for all kinds of situations. And most of them are interconnected. And so the core planning education in and of itself allows you to start to focus on issues that are interesting. So when you choose your electives, if you're interested in affordable housing, you might choose to do an elective on housing. You might also choose to do one on real estate and land development, which will allow you to understand how money flows through the market to start to affect housing affordability. You may choose to do one on urban design or on site planning because your interests in housing also relate to the ways in which buildings are designed. So we have transportation and environmental planning as options, but you also have the chance between your studios and your electives to start to focus your work a little bit on planning issues that matter to you.
Awesome. On that note, we actually did have another one come through about, would this program be good if after university I decided to go into real estate?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an excellent thing to do if you're interested in real estate, because understanding how, for example, provincial government policy affects land value is a big part of the real estate market. A number of our students come from families that are either developers of land or people who have an interest long-term in doing broader real estate related work. So it's a great program because you'll start to really understand the bigger system into which the real estate market fits.
Perfect. Can this program be tailored to more community planning and policy and less design?
Yes. So design skills and being design literate is a fundamental part of planning, because when people start to imagine the communities they want to live in, they tell stories and they use pictures and other forms of visual imagery. So the design piece is really important. But as your studios progress, the last two are what we call client-based studios. So in our last two studios, we've got students working with community-based partners on projects. And some of those are focused on policy. Some of them are focused on community engagement. Some of them are focused on neighborhood change. And some of them have more of a design focus. We really offer you the full range of options available.
Awesome. So this person who joined us said, just curious, but is there any architecture aspects involved in this program?
So what I would say is that architects and planners and landscape architects and urban designers have some shared work we do together and then work that we do distinctly on our own. So when you say, is there some architecture related work, what we do is we teach in studio, which often involves, especially in the first year, putting pencil to paper and using computer technology to start to learn how to design online. So we share that common ground, but planners tend to work at a bigger scale, which means that we work on issues, not the design of buildings. So instead of figuring out what a building will look like, we try to understand how buildings come together to create livable communities. We also try to understand how the size and the shape of the building and the height of the building impacts the neighborhood around it and what can happen inside the building. Whereas architects may focus on the actual design of the space on the outside or sometimes on the inside. So there is some connection, but planning work tends to start to bring things together and knit things together. And there is a design piece to the work that we do. And if you're interested in that, we have 3 architects who are faculty members in our school with a focus on urban design. So you can start to figure out how to design parks and public spaces if you're interested, for example.
Awesome. Are graduates of this degree able to work internationally?
Yes, that's a really good question. So our registration is transferable to the United States and vice versa. So you can take your registered professional planning status and go and practice in the United States and in the UK, and then it's one-to-one with other countries. Are you trained well to work internationally? Our focus in our planning program is very much focused on planning inside Ontario and inside Canada. Having said that, we have a really robust planning framework in Ontario, which means that the way in which we plan here is often the way other jurisdictions want to plan or other places want to plan. And so what we find is that Canadian planners and Ontario trained planners tend to be very employable in other countries, in part because our planning system is good here. And so the skills that you gain with us are transferable to other locations. We don't have a significant focus, though, on planning in countries in places like sub-Saharan Africa or in Central or South America. There are some faculty members who do research in countries outside Canada, but we aren't a planning school with a massive international development focus. So if that's what you're looking for, we might not be the best fit, but the skills we will give you will be useful in other planning environments.
Awesome. On that note, as we talk about international opportunities, I know you mentioned that there's a couple trips that students have been on, and there were some pictures on the slides. Can you touch on, obviously, in non-COVID times, some of the things that our students have gone to do on an international scale, other than some of those trips you've already mentioned?
Sure. And Nicholas, I'm going to cue you up in a minute to talk about your experience on our exchange program too. Okay, so heads up. So one of the things that we've done is planning field trips have been part of the core and the history and tradition of our planning school for a long time. We've always felt that having you take a week away from us and getting on a bus or getting on a plane and going and experiencing planning in another city, having a chance to talk to planning professionals in other cities, and having a chance to go walk around on your own is a fundamental part of what we hope to do. In the pandemic, I think it's important to share that one of the things that we did this year was we really expanded the geography of our field trip reach because everybody was learning from home. And so we had planning field trips. Maybe Amana, you can talk about this after Nicholas talks about exchange, but we had planning field trips studying Barcelona. We had Stockholm, we had Chicago, we had New York. We had all kinds of places that are harder to get to, although we typically run trips to North American cities on the Eastern Seaboard in the United States and in Canada. So we really value that. We also have a China field camp that tends to run every second summer, where students are going for 3 to 4 weeks to China to do planning related work. And then we have an international exchange program. Nicholas, do you want to turn on your camera and maybe talk about it a bit? We've sent students to Australia, to the UK most recently. So Nicholas, why don't you tell everyone about your experience last year?
Yeah, so the international exchange program, it's definitely an amazing opportunity in the urban planning program, and it happens in your second year of undergrad, in the second semester, so winter semester of your second year. I had the opportunity to go to the University of Cardiff, which is in the capital of Wales in the UK, and it was certainly a great experience. It was an opportunity to really connect with obviously the physical environment in Cardiff and in the UK, and just looking at things from the European context in general, but also to obviously connect with the people there as well. And the University of Cardiff is like many universities in the UK that have a great faculty with geography and planning. And there was an opportunity, for example, in one of my modules, they call them modules there, so classes, to essentially redevelop a site, an old historical site in like the northern mining towns of Wales. And I think but we were able to really go in depth about creating housing stock and streets that kind of fit the British and European form and stuff like that. And it was something that I hadn't done in Ryerson, as in-depth as we are on our program. Getting that extra context from across the pond was really a great experience. Despite the circumstances of the pandemic, it was a very, very, very enriching experience.
Nicholas, where did you go on field trip this year?
So I went to Copenhagen.
Okay.
So I definitely took advantage of the extra geography that we kind of brought in this year, and also for the fact that it's an expensive place to go to in person, so it's a lot cheaper to go from your home.
Yeah, Amana, where did you go on your field trip?
I went to Buenos Aires, Argentina. So I also got that international experience, and it's just so insane to see that, like, compare and contrast planning within Toronto or within Canada to South American cities and countries. It was a crazy experience. Even though it was online, they still tried to submerge us within the culture, and we watched like an Argentinian movie one night, and we just learned from a bunch of different planners from Argentina, and it was insane. It was honestly insane.
Yeah, it's funny, in all of our heart of hearts, we really would have rather have had everybody go in person, but we were very lucky to have so many generous people from all around the world agree to meet with students and talk about their experiences. And on the flip side, we have really amazing students. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of as the director of the school is that we always get this feedback about how interested and smart and good planners our students are. So it goes both ways. You all do a good job of representing us, which means people make time and space for our students. So I think it's a really good example of, we tried to make the most of what we had to work with. And for sure, more students were allowed to learn something about an international place without having to pay for it this year. So being able to go is better, but we did do a good job, I think, of trying to give people new opportunities and make the most of the time that we find ourselves in, eh?
Absolutely. That's such a strong point. We actually had a follow-up question wondering about if Ryerson's planning program offers a focus specifically on international development. I think we've kind of touched on this, but maybe if you could clarify.
Yeah, it doesn't, but that doesn't mean that you can't build that learning into what you want to do. If you're really keen on it, you can take courses in your electives, for example, in other departments. There are lots of Ryerson programs that have courses that focus on learning with a much more international perspective. And planning is something that's practiced around the world, and some of the skills are transferable. So it's not our area of expertise, but it doesn't mean you can't, if you're focused on it, try to gain those kinds of experiences. There are also other Ryerson international experiences that you can be a part of. For example, again, when we go back to life when it's safe to travel, the Faculty of Community Services, which is part of what our school is a part of, faculties help divide up the university. FCS runs this program with Amrita University in India, where we send between 6 and 8 students every summer from our faculty to go to one of what they call their living labs, which is basically like a studio in India. And so we've had students go and help build housing clinics. We've had students go and work with community members on public health initiatives. So that's one example of a number that Ryerson International offers. The other thing that's interesting about being a student in Toronto is that you don't have to go very far away to learn about communities from around the world, because the city is so magically diverse, right? Over half of Torontonians came from somewhere else before they came and lived here. And so this notion of an international perspective on planning, you can learn a lot by going to Scarborough. You can learn a lot by going and doing a planning studio in Brampton. Many of us are doing planning related work with communities of particular groups of people in other parts of the region. And so international related planning can actually happen all with your Presto card. It's not exactly the same as going far away, but there are opportunities to learn more about international communities of people by being a student in our region.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we do have another question here, which is regarding some graduate studies. So would you suggest students pursue graduate studies after this undergraduate degree? And they have in brackets MUD.
A Master's of Urban Design. That's a really good question. So our undergraduate program and our master's program are both what are called first professional degrees, which means that you only need one of our degrees, not both of them. It would be redundant to do a master's, a 2-year master's in planning after doing our 4-year undergrad in planning, because they both make you eligible for registration in a profession. And MUD is a Master's of Urban Design. A handful of students every year go on to do design-related master's work, whether it's a Master's of Urban Design or a Master's of Landscape Architecture or a Master's of Architecture in and of itself. You are very well prepared as a planning student to make applications to those kinds of programs, because you will have a portfolio of work that you can show. We also have 3 faculty members who are urban designers and architects and trained as such. 2 of whom were at Harvard and 1 who came from Yale. And so their networks of people in practice and at those institutions positions you very well if you're so inclined. And we also have people who are both designers and planners. And so our program, if you want to build design literacy and capacity, can certainly help you expand that skill set and put you in good stead to apply for those kinds of degrees. You don't have to do a master's program after. Your undergraduate degree in planning will train you to be a planner. But planning students sometimes go on and do graduate work in things like public administration or a master's in business or a law degree, or they go on and do an advanced planning degree. And sometimes if you're dorky like me, you'll go do a PhD eventually. So there are options available, but you are career ready at the end of your undergraduate planning degree.
Awesome. So someone here is trying to decide between either doing a Bachelor of Urban and Regional Planning or doing a Bachelor of Arts and then doing the master's program. So how would you compare these 2 options?
I would say right now in November, just apply for both. I think at this point in your application process, you should keep as many options open as possible. They're both good options. They'll just train you in slightly different ways and you'll engage in different things. If you aren't entirely sure that you want to be a planner right now and you have interests that are bigger than the kinds of classes that I showed you, then doing an undergraduate degree in arts might be a good start for you, thinking being that you'll then apply to do a master's program in planning. But if you're really interested in urban change and trying to make a difference and working with people on community problems and trying to mix things like policy and economics and ecology and design, then a planning program is a really good place for you to start, because it's interdisciplinary by its very nature. So you're going to learn a lot of things, but it's also focused. So you'll feel like you're making progress, that you're learning real things. Nicholas and Amana, does that resonate with you? Like, do you feel like you're actually learning how to do real stuff in the classroom? You're in 3rd year right now. How's that sitting with you?
Yeah, so it's a very practical program. I feel like it's specific, but it's also broad, if that makes sense. So you become like that urban planner, but if you take like 10 different people, probably like 2 people will have like the same interests. Like people have different interests within planning. So if you don't necessarily want to be an urban planner, I still think that it's like a pretty good option, because there are so many different things you could do afterwards. Even like Nicholas and myself, like we want to go down totally different streams after this program ends, but it still offers like that practical experience. And yeah, I feel like you'll grow to love it as well through that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think like I'll just give one example right now. And it's like, just before this meeting this morning, I was meeting with a studio group about us working on a planning justification report for a golf course site in Victoria Park Station on the East York Scarborough border. So if that, planning justification report doesn't sound familiar to you, it is something that planners do in the planning field. But, if that sounds overwhelming, then not to worry, because the urban or regional planning program kind of walks you through that process, and you kind of, are able to learn how to do it in the program, by doing it. So yeah, you definitely really do get, that practical experience in the program. It's not just, we're not just saying that, it's reflective in the work that we're doing right now, say in our studio classes. Where we have to, deal with things like zoning bylaws, official plans, growth plans for Ontario, stuff like that. The program walks you through all of that, and it's definitely great.
Awesome. I would like to take advantage of having students here as well, considering that a lot of the people who are thinking about this program might be a little bit concerned about the transition from high school to university. And specifically within this program, we heard during the presentation that there's a lot of hands-on things that you're doing. There's a lot of studios that you're involved in and all that stuff. So could you talk a little bit about that transition from your first year of university to where you are now, and kind of just what you were feeling in that time?
Yeah, so I think in university in general, people go in feeling scared because they're scared they won't make friends, or they won't like their courses or anything of that sort. So a unique experience that this program offers is that you are in the same classes as the same 100 and so people. So you stay within your cohort, and I feel like that sense of community is huge within our program, and it's something that should be emphasized and celebrated as well. So I feel like having that cohort to be in every single class with me gave me that sense of comfort in my first year, and it's gone up until third year. So we're in the same classes as the same people. Well, the majority of the classes, that is. So not your electives, but I feel like people with like experiences really gives that sense of comfort, and you become familiar with these people because you have most classes with them as well. So I feel like the transition from high school to university is tough, and you might feel alone, but having that sense of community is huge, and it's what got me through it.
Yeah, 100%. Like, people in your year support each other, and I think that's very, very important. It can't go understated. And I think another thing when entering first year university from high school is really just to be involved and become involved in things. And I know it may sound like, oh, I'm already trying to transition to my first year. Why would I, make my life even harder by trying to get involved in things like that? Obviously, don't overwhelm or overwork yourself. But I think what the benefits that come with joining an association such as RAPS, for example, like the one that the association that Amanda and I lead. And I'm not trying to self-promote RAPS here or anything like that. But what I'm trying to say is that, when you join associations like this, you really kind of get an understanding of how the program runs, how it works, and just understanding, or like understanding student interests and stuff like that. Kind of being on the ground and involved in those things makes you feel like you have, a better sense of what's going on, which is definitely a benefit as well. And also, you're able to interact with other years as well through RAPS. You're able to talk to second years, third years, fourth years. You're able to get, what they how they transitioned into university, and how they went, their experiences and stuff like that. So
I'm going to say this because Amanda and Nick probably won't, but one of the most amazing things we have at our school is our student leadership team. If you go to the RAPS website, the Ryerson Association Planning Students website, you can see all of the students that are involved and the range of things that people can be involved with. So they have merchandise people, they've got special events people, they've got people who focus on things like governance and bylaws. Every year has representatives in the planning, Ryerson Association of Planning Student Programs. So there are ways to get involved from the minute you arrive on campus. But if you go to their Instagram page, you'll start to see the kinds of things that RAPS organizes. So just this week was Career Week. And if you look at it, you'll see the range of activities. They brought in people who work in private sector planning and work in government related planning. And there are also social events too. So we're super lucky in the planning school to have such strong leadership from students. And Nicholas and Amon are only in third year. It's really unusual to be third year co-presidents, but it's an example of how initiative and tremendous skill puts them in a position to help lead one of the most impactful student-based organizations we have on campus.
Awesome. Yeah. And Nicholas, never feel bad about self-promoting. You clearly found something that you are passionate about, you've done really well with, and to be, like as Pamela was saying, co-president of this is huge, right? And it's a testament to finding yourself within a community in the university, finding friendships, finding a lot of ways to get involved and, just feel more comfortable on campus. So definitely don't ever be afraid to self-promote those. Those are awesome examples. I think we have about 4 minutes left here. So let's finish off with one final question. I think a lot of our students are curious to know about what to expect, not only in their first year from our students, but also for what to expect in the classroom. I know in the presentation you mentioned there was a sad picture of no one in the classroom, but you mentioned that we've transitioned online. So can you touch on a little bit about what they might expect if things are similar in first year next year for them?
Sure. I'm going to let Nicholas and Amana speak first, and then I'll follow up. Okay?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my first year of planning, I think, was different than the rest of the years that I've done so far. The first semester is more general than it is specific. The second semester, you kind of get a feel of what urban planning actually is. So the first semester, you do more so like microeconomics, local politics in Canada, just things that aren't necessarily like planning studio, planning this, planning that. But second semester, you get that feel, and that's what lasts for the entire duration of the program. So going into school, you still do get a feel of what your cohort will be like, because you have, I think, either 2 or 3 classes that you have with that cohort each time, I guess. Going into your second semester, you get to experience studio. So studio is something that you have to take 6 times over the duration of 6 times, right? Yeah, okay, so each semester except for the first semester of first year and the last semester of fourth year. And studio is an experience that I have never actually experienced in high school, and I didn't think I'd experience in university, and not in a bad way at all. It's such a practical experience, and I feel like that's what made me realize that I'm in the right program, and it also what made me wonder why not everyone is in this program, if that makes sense. So you get that experience of either like drawing and drafting or computerized renders and all this kind of stuff, and you produce things that you're so proud of. And while you're doing this, you're in our building, which like on Ryerson's campus, and it's a building that's open 24 hours, and you see so many friendly faces, and obviously times are uncertain, and eventually we will go back to that format, but you're in this building and it's such a community feel, and I've never felt something like it before. So first year is the first semester for sure it doesn't feel like how it will be for the rest of the time at Ryerson, but second semester and on is that community feel and that like focus on planning for most of the courses that you take.
Nicholas, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put first year for sure. Was the question about like online, like if it things like
yeah, what will first year be like if we're in this environment that we're in now next year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think like all of the points that Amanda brought up, are like not like it's not always completely transferable online, because that's just not the nature of how life works. But I think a lot of it can be, and what it comes down to, like creating various spaces of community online to connect. We have like a good online platform in urban planning where people can reach out and have conversations about planning issues, or Specific class pages are very well set up and well organized. And I think like the level of approachability, both with like your fellow peers and faculty, doesn't change just because things are online. So, people are still really approachable, and you still get, that community online. And I think, that can transfer over well into the online environment if it is happening, if that happens next year.
And maybe I'll just briefly add for all of our attendees, I put 2 links in the chat around videos that we made as faculty members. One which focuses on what it was like for us to start teaching planning school online. And the other one just focuses on some of the things that we think we offer as a planning program. So you can follow up and watch those online. And we're always happy to answer your questions about what the learning will be like as this continued pandemic unfolds.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both to Professor Pamela Robinson, as well as both of our students for joining us. What is going to happen right now is we have been taken right to the hour. We are going to shut off our audio and our video, and we will stay online until any final questions get answered behind the scenes. Thank you so much for joining us today. Quick reminder that the Q&A pod will not be part of the recording. So if you happen to get a really great answer from us or any links that were shared, feel free to make sure you're making a couple notes of them or take a screenshot so you can refer to them later on. On behalf of Ryerson University, we hope that you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy during this time, and we hope to see you again soon, whether it be virtually or in person. So thanks again so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much.